You're listening to Risk and Resolve, where leadership, business, and risk management collide. We bring you real conversations, sharp insights, and strategies for success. And now for your hosts, Ben Conner and Todd Hufford.
Welcome back to another episode of Risk and Resolve. I'm Ben Conner along with Todd Hufford. And today we are looking ahead. In a few hours, it'll be 2026, and we're going to look into our crystal ball and see what we think 2026 might have in store for us from a business perspective, an insurance perspective, and, in 365 days from now, we'll see how totally wrong we might be. In fact, I heard a quote from Winston Churchill earlier just about the idea of, that's the job of a statesman or a politician, is to say what they think is going to happen, and then in 365 days or in the future, look back and see how wrong we were. But
yeah,
we'll see what happens here.
We can delete it, right? A year from now, we can remove this podcast.
I don't know.
Maybe
get out the checklist and see, see what it looks like. But Todd, I just wanted to toss it over to you, just from a general economic perspective. What are you thinking as we go into 2026 that we can some trends that we should pay attention to?
Well, first and foremost is interest rates. You can't go a day of watching the news without talking about interest rates. We've gotten a couple cuts this year. We've got a December meeting that this recording is happening before it, but will be aired after it. So we'll find out whether that meeting results in another quarter-point rate cut. We've got a new Fed governor coming in the May timeframe, which everybody, all the betting pools say it's going to be Kevin Hassett, who actually was on the radio as I was driving in this morning talking about all things economic. And everybody views him, or really anybody who the president picks to be in that role, is going to be very favorable to lowering interest rates. So the question is going to be, how low can we go from here? So we've reached the time in our podcast, Ben, of our first game. So here we go. And the game is, what year was the highest prime rate in the United States of the modern era, where there was a common prime rate versus back in the day when the rates were very different in different colonies?
I don't know, 1978?
You're close, 1980. And what would that prime rate have been, Ben?
11%.
21.5.
No kidding.
Okay. Part two. When was the lowest prime rate of the modern era?
Probably right before or during COVID.
So it's kind of a trick question. March of 2020, as well as in the December timeframe of 2008. So, the financial crisis of the 2008, but we got a double. How low was that prime rate during both of those times?
2.5?
3.25.
Okay.
Was the prime rate. So you can see the broad disparity of what we've had over the course of 40 years. And where we're at today is at 7. So we're a whole lot closer to the bottom than the top. So I don't think we're going to be going back to 3.25, but we could easily shave a point and a half off of where things are going. So I think economically, other than all the things that you see out of the new administration, with everything focused on economic, from repatriating jobs to repatriating capital to building factories to basically the onshoring of everything you can imagine. There's a lot of stuff in our area just between here and Purdue, with a lot of microchips, planning to be made. Nothing's made yet, but they're organizing water rights, they're buying land, they're making partnerships. And so it's becoming a big deal with the manufacturing trying to come back. But we've got a lot of costs in our system that still make it difficult to manufacture things here at some kind of reasonable level. So interest rates, that's my answer. Final answer, locking it in.
Final answer is interest rates. What do you see from an employment perspective? And what type of connectivity is there to interest rates with employment? Maybe none. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. What I'm seeing a little bit is there's a lot of reports out of big companies. You saw it out of a lot of tech companies, the return to work movement. Yeah. And a lot of calls going out. You have JP Morgan has built a huge new headquarters in New York, I believe, obviously, and as an attempt to pull people back and Jamie Dimon has talked a lot about getting people back to work. If you just type in 2026 return to work strategy or plan or whatever, you're going to see a lot of articles where it seems and feels like a lot of employers are going to be asking employees to come back to the workforce more, maybe not full 5 days a week, but more than what they are. And for some of those companies, I think it's a way that they're trying to reduce their headcount. I think they are calling it either AI or they're calling it return to work, but they know some people just can't or won't do that. And so there will be some level of attrition through that process.
Yeah, I think, my personal opinion is, as I've thought a lot about this, is I think there just needs to be, over the last couple of years and just thinking about working remotely, I think it's brought a lot of opportunity. Even in our business, that's brought a lot of opportunity, and there is a usefulness to it. But I also think about early career folks, and just I look back, and obviously memory is fuzzy, and we pick out maybe the high points of our own experience. But I look back on mentors that I had in the business, and I just can't imagine being trained or propelling a career not around people, like in your home office. I find that to be very difficult, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. I just look back on the opportunity that I had and the people I was able to be around and absorb from, be a sponge to, and I wouldn't trade that for the world. So I look at the return to work from that perspective of it. It likely is the kindest thing we can do for the, I think it's Generation Z coming into the workforce and trying to grow their careers.
I'm old enough to remember, and when you and I started in the agency in the 05-06 timeframe, technology was not there to where you could get email on your phone. Technology was not there to where our team members could access our main agency management system remotely, easily. Very clunky. And so when I think about remote work, what it's done, I mean, every single one of our teammates, if they're not remote themselves, meaning they live somewhere other than Indianapolis, Indiana, even if they do, they have a home setup that we provide for them. And as I look at kind of the list of the technology's improved so much, and here are some really good uses of work from home. Back in the day when we had a weather day, a snow day, the office was closed. Like you might go make a few phone calls, but you might be calling an underwriter who was working from their home. It just didn't work very well.
Remember the phone tree we had of how
Yeah.
you communicate with people? It's just fascinating to remember that stuff.
I'm going to call Ben, and Ben's going to call 3 people, and I'm going to call somebody else, and they're going to call 3 people. And that way we felt like you didn't have to call everybody. So weather days is a wonderful use of being able to have all that technology at your fingertips and not have to ask people to come in and not miss some productivity. How about caring for a sick child or an aging parent? There's a lot of people who are in that sandwich generation. They're doing a little bit of both. And when the schools close, a lot of parents, the daycares close. And so to be able to work from home while your kids are maybe doing some e-learning, that's a great use for remote work. Another use I've seen and used myself is back in the day, we'd use that, call it a week's vacation. You'd be off 5 days and you try to pick up both weekends. And so you've got 9 days to work with. To me, with remote work, I can kind of extend that vacation. And I can tell my family, hey, for this day and this day, I'm going to log in. I'm going to be working a better part of the day. So you guys are going to have to go do a pool day or a beach day or do something on your own. But it allows us not to have to run away to vacation and then run back and then come back with all this stuff to kind of catch up on. So I'm thankful for the technology that's come about post 2020 that allows us to be more nimble. But I'm very concerned that people's careers are becoming stunted. And that's at any level. That's at an early career, mid-career, or even at the tail end of your career. You should be pouring back into people. And if everybody's at home, it's just a lot harder to do that. So I see that being something that a lot of businesses are kind of working through. And the more businesses I talk to, more and more of them are saying, oh, we're back in the office 5 days a week. And I'm not sure that's necessarily where I want to go with it. But, there's a lot of businesses that are doing that.
Well, there's an economic impact to that as well, in investing in your community when people are in the office and are occupying commercial spaces and that sort of thing.
buying lunch at a restaurant nearby and all those things.
Yeah.
What about the benefits? I mean, you guys never cease to amaze on the crazy things you guys do. How is this renewal season going, and how are employers feeling going into 26 on their health plan?
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the benefits side, I'll get to that question, but I'm going to start with something that you mentioned about, building and growth on the northwest side of Indianapolis, and that's largely, not solely, but largely driven by Eli Lilly and their blockbuster medication of Mounjaro for diabetes, and Zepbound for weight loss, and anything really attached to weight loss. Um, that has propelled that company to astronomical levels.
Most valuable
Um,
drug company?
yeah, um, and it's not going to stop. Obviously, they have some things going on the Alzheimer's front, but really the next blockbuster for them is Zepbound, Mounjaro, whatever. I think mostly Zepbound in a pill form. And so you can Google what that name is. Obviously, all these medications have interesting names in their own language, but that's going to that's impacting Indiana, specifically Indianapolis. Also will impact health plans. And that's also ties into what you just mentioned about health renewals, because in my entire career, which I've been doing this for 19 years, this has by far been the most dramatic rate impact
Mm,
from an increase in healthcare costs, or I shouldn't even say that, it's health insurance costs. And what drives health insurance costs is healthcare costs, and you have to look at what the drivers are for that. And largely it's large claimants. We're seeing claims that are millions of dollars, which is crazy. We've never seen that before. But also the impact of the change in the in unit cost for diabetes through Mounjaro, Ozempic, Trulicity, the category of GLP-1, and then knowing that that's even going to balloon further with it going to pill format. Um, that's had a major impact on health insurance costs. And I think we say it every year, but it's these costs seem to be just untenable. And what also we've seen on the benefits side is it's untenable to the point where employees are tapped out. Like it's really
right.
difficult to increase cost on employees, not only in premium but in deductible. Because if the average American has $500 to $1,000 in savings and they have a deductible that's $3,000, you're functionally uninsured, and there's no value in the $1 million expense of your healthcare budget. So it's really a problematic place. But what we find when there's problematic areas is that's where innovation can occur. So I think this renewal season going into 2026 is going to have employers searching, of how do they become involved in the supply chain of healthcare in a more meaningful level. I really do think that will exist. I think employers will task their leadership team of how do we solve for this. I do think there is some concern. There is some concern from my perspective, I should say, that employers might be getting to the point of throwing their hands up that we can't do anything about it. And that even parlays, you look at, if employers start saying that, and then you look at, what's happening politically with Mamdani in New York City as a Democratic socialist, and the midterms coming up in 2026, you could see another real push for, Medicare for all, and some momentum behind that, because, hey, if we can't solve it, let's rely on the government to solve it. But we have to look at history to know that anytime the government tries to solve a problem, they end up making it worse, or destroying the system altogether. I'm not saying that their current system is right, but I don't think that's the solution that any of us are ultimately want on the other side of that rainbow, if you will. So I think that's something to look at in 2026 from a benefits perspective, as it meets politics and some momentum on that front. But that's that's kind of the genesis of rate impact that then parlays into what really can come from that and what should we be looking for in 2026.
A lot of the discussion during the government shutdown came down to the Democrats fighting for the extension of the additional
Right.
subsidies on the
Right.
Obamacare plans. And I want to clarify that it was the extension of the additional subsidies. There
Right.
were always subsidies, and I don't know the exact date, but it was pandemic era. They upped the subsidies,
Correct.
which it was an increase in amount, but almost more importantly, it allowed individuals with greater incomes to still receive a subsidy. Did I have that
That's
right?
right. Yeah, and yeah, it allowed for bigger subsidies, so people are paying less for healthcare. I think what's confusing in a media cycle is you think that health insurance is less, and it's not. It's just subsidized by the government of a system that is going out of control in cost, and it's ultimately, you know, the greediness of a system and how it's been built. I think also it's been perpetuated by the Affordable Care Act with some provisions that incentivize that type of behavior. So, I think that's where the political side of things, you kind of miss the message of healthcare is health insurance is expensive because healthcare is expensive, and the subsidies were simply a band-aid on a total like, mortal wound, if you will.
Right.
It's just not really solving the problem. It's just really trying to cover it up.
One thing I always thought was interesting, and I figured this out kind of early on in my professional life, was that the payments that an employee makes to their health plan, my deductions here at Conner Insurance, are tax deductible.
Yeah.
Right? There are Section 125.
Right.
And the amount that we as the employer pay is a deductible expense against our income. It reduces our profit. We can deduct that and only pay tax on something less than that. However, once you move to an individual plan, or at least previously, any premium you paid was all post-tax. And one thought I had back in the kind of 2017, 2020 range was, if I were the government, I would want to move everybody off of an employer-sponsored plan because I would immediately increase my tax revenue. Now, how do ICRAs play into that with Obamacare premiums being heavily subsidized? Is that payment still taxable, or is it non-taxable?
Yeah. So from an ICRA perspective, it's a pre-tax event, but I will say you don't get the subsidies either. It's one or the other. You don't get the subsidy as like a tax benefit, if you will, and an ICRA tax benefit. It's one or the other. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think the removal of the subsidies will be disastrous to some extent. I think probably, first of all, I do believe the subsidies should be removed at some
Well,
point.
the
Like,
additional subsidies. There will still be subsidies.
correct. Well, correct. But I think level heads, probably you reduce that over time and create a schedule for that, so it's not just one big bite of the apple at once. Because I think it will be painful for people. And I mean, ultimately, what they're going to realize is the expense of healthcare and the problem of the system. And what's sad is that as individuals, you don't really have control to fix it. You're just a victim of a poorly run system, which then probably parlays you into saying maybe Medicare for all is a good approach. But not to get
Well,
into
let's go
politics
deeper,
too
right?
much.
It's bad here, so let's go even deeper into it.
Yeah, and not to get into politics, but I mean, let's just look at human behavior and what we would really ask for ourselves. Like, if this is broken, let's go to something different that we pay less for and that kind of thing. But um, it's just kind of an interesting environment to see how that'll play out in 2026.
I don't see it's when I hear the talking heads on both sides, particularly the Republican side, I don't hear them very aggressively thinking that they're going to reduce them at least right away, because they know it affects too many people, too many votes. You got midterms coming up. So I think they'll make a big stink about it. And I think everybody will point fingers at each other. And I think we're going to be stuck with the higher subsidies. And maybe it's on a declining schedule, to your point, over time. But I think they're going to get re-upped at some level.
I think that would be the right move. I mean, the reality is, the Democrats are trying things. They passed Obamacare, and anytime the Republicans have had an opportunity, that's just a big nothing burger. They have no plan.
Yep.
So then you kind of wonder if like anyone really cares. So I don't know. Again, not to get too much into politics, but it's just been more or less fact of what's been occurring. Now, one thing I would say on the benefits side that I think is notable and exciting and something to pay attention to is um, is the direct to consumer on the pharmacy side. Like Lilly has Lilly Direct, where they're selling
Yep.
their medications directly to the consumer at a far reduced price for the product than through the pharmacy benefit manager or the PBM that's connected to the insurance. So I think that that's something really to pay attention to. Another kind of similar item is Trump RX and medications being available through that. Now, when you think about that, that starts like you're like, oh well, tell me like why isn't there a direct to consumer? And, the reality is there's been PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, has really been the arbiter of a pharmacy benefit through employers and has been ultimately a revenue extractor in the industry. So that's why when you're like, how come if I just pay a cash price for the medication, a lot of times it can be cheaper than what I get through my insurance. And that's just simply through all of the mechanics of a pharmacy benefit manager and the revenue extraction that exists, that not only at the time of claim is a problem, but that parlays into your premium as well. So we've seen things through time that have tried to subvert the PBM. And I'm just going back on my memory, but the first thing I can really recall is you have Good RX, where it's like, hey, it's a coupon card and some transparency of where you can get medications for the cheapest price. That was kind of the first thing from that I recall. I'm sure there's something else out there. Then you have like the Script Co. or Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drugs, where they have a generic wholesale pharmacy that they say, hey, for a membership fee, instead of even getting, actually, even before that, you had Walmart and Kroger doing $4 generics, right? That was a way to subvert the PBM and just do cash pay price.
Yep.
But then going back to my point about Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drugs or Script Co. or organizations like that, it's a generic wholesaler that has a membership where instead of paying $10 for the generic, you can get it for 80 cents, or even, instead of paying $80 for a generic, you could get it for $5 or $4. And so these are bypass items. The problem with those bypass items have been that if you pay for it in that vein, it doesn't count towards a deductible.
But you're paying less money.
And then you go back to the idea of, well, I can't afford my deductible anyway. So we have a real interesting environment where there's opportunity for real supply chain management and employers and their consultants to do pretty interesting things.
So here's a question. Who is Good RX?
So ultimately it's more or less maybe a better PBM,
But do you know who's behind it?
No, I don't.
Well, I don't either. And this is just something that a pharmacist once told me. He said that, I don't know who it is, but when we run a Good RX card, it pulls up a code, or it's in the same format that a lot of our government, like, I don't know if it's Medicare or whatever stuff, is in, which made me think that I wonder if that was like a soft play to where the government was providing this path that said, we're not going to rock the boat too much, but we're going to let this happen. When I think about Lilly doing the direct, I think the government's been trying to figure out how to address the drug costs without getting too involved. But then as soon as tariffs got involved, and a lot of these drugs are manufactured outside the U.S., I think these pharmaceutical companies said, hey, we'll make a deal. If we can kick the can down the road on your 125% tariff on our drugs coming in, manufactured overseas, we will in turn provide these direct to our citizens at this pricing. I think the government's finally pressured the manufacturers where it really hurts, which is their manufacturing cost.
Yeah. And that goes to just a simple, you have one side of the spectrum of a free market, and then you have the other side of the spectrum where it's total government control. And you think about healthcare. I mean, healthcare as a business is probably not a good business model item. And you kind of go back to like, your utilities of like, it's something that's necessary to humanity. So if you have control of that as a business model, so I think when you play this out, there is some place for healthcare if it could settle in an environment that's probably the right thing for society. It's probably in that realm of a utility where there's some privatization and some private pressure, but there's also some government intervention and some oversight and control, like a utility. Because, I mean, what do we all know is that everyone who's born dies, and that we gradually get worse in our health. Like that will happen to every single person on the face of the planet, except for one that lived, uh, back in Jerusalem, um, rose from the dead. But, um, everyone is going to have that experience. So everyone is going to incur healthcare costs. So there is a need to shepherd it well. And this current system certainly isn't doing that. But anyway, back to
on that line real quick, Duke Energy, publicly traded company, regulated by regulators. Sometimes we can agree or disagree with how much rate increase gets passed. American Water, water provider, AES. So there's a precedent for utility companies being public companies, but regulated to manage those increases and the costs that they incur and the product they deliver.
Yeah. So on the PBM side, I think that's a really interesting thing that we need to watch into 2026, and how possibly can that get integrated into a health plan. Um, I mentioned that the GLP-1 issues. I think the last thing is I think employers are going to start looking for items to truly supplement the health insurance spend and to create a perception of value. Um, like a direct primary care or something where employees can use it and it feels like a benefit. The problem that happened in health insurance and healthcare is employers are now spending millions of dollars and employees don't view it as a benefit. It's a necessity. And once I have to use it, I'm appreciative of it, but it doesn't feel like a benefit. It is a compensation item. So I think employers are looking to get, how can we manage a supply chain? And then how can we use those dollars that we just created in efficiency management and actually buy a benefit that is used by an employer or by an employee that can be like a felt, hey, I'm really glad. And that could be like, a type of wellness program, or that could be, as I mentioned, direct primary care. That could be a chaplain. I mean, there's a lot of different options and opportunities to use those dollars for benefits. But, um, you know, we're feeling cost pressure, and I think there's just going to be a lot of attention to this. Has got to stop, because ultimately you can't increase payroll and people's income if it's being siphoned out to health insurance.
What was the average increase we saw among our clients?
Well, that's a loaded question. I would say that from a marketplace, if you look at the individual market, we were seeing roughly in Indiana 20 to 30% increases, and then
These are
fully
small
insured
business
market.
plans.
Yeah, and that's for the individual. I think in small business, the carriers were trying to really push that, again, driven by high claimants and the rise of pharmacy costs. Those that had a better experience where they were, you know, um, managing their expenses to inflationary, like normal inflation. Um, they're self-funded and they're doing things to control their own expense. And I think that's what employers really need to look at when they're managing a health plan is, um, there's this lie of medical inflation, and there's only medical inflation is because health insurance companies have allowed that and have sold that's what you have to have, because the reality is the rest of the economy runs off of a CPI, right?
Yep.
So I think if you're an employer, and what does it look like to manage my health plan successfully? It is, if you look over the course of a long period of time, we're managing our health plan to a CPI index, right? And that would be deemed reasonable, and that can only be done in one environment.
Lots going on. The largest employers who are self-funded and have all they put effort towards managing the expenses. What kind of increase did they see this last year?
I think they saw higher than normal, because I don't think that they totally escaped those pressures that existed. Just because, if they're participating with a network or otherwise, you're going to get some larger shock claims, and you're going to get some rise in pharmacy expense. So I would say that they were in
High single, low double.
high single. What I saw this year is an appetite for employers to say, okay, now's the time. We're gonna take more control of this, and we're gonna do something different. I also think that that's the employers that we attract, because that's our model. That's our business model, is to return control to employers. But we definitely saw larger employers say, we have to take some, we have to make some changes, and because we have to protect our employees' paychecks, and we want increases to go to wages and not to health insurance. So we have to do something different. So that's been the pressure on the benefits side. That's what I see in 2026. And just to recap, I see some interesting movement on the PBM side. I see employers looking at what other value adds can I do from a benefits perspective. I see employers making maybe more, they would probably call it risk, but more calculated change to better the offering for their employees. I see employers navigating the GLP-1 expense and trying to do that differently, because that's a tidal wave. That's a tsunami that's crushing health plan budgets. So that's what I'm seeing. And I've seen the early adopters find great success in pursuing those items already. So it'll be fun to see just kind of how those conversations, and see what really progresses. And then I think the last thing to watch, again, as I mentioned, is maybe from a political landscape is, do these subsidies return to some levels that's not a cliff, and it's more of a pathway out? And do we see another push of Medicare for all in midterms, knowing that this cost pressure is just brutal for everyone? And it is. It's a major problem.
Well, if we're seeing our clients who generally lean a bit more towards addressing the cost, being willing to
Supply
have
chain managers,
some
correct.
disruption for that cost savings. If we're seeing that in our own book, I would only assume that we're seeing that just in the marketplace. And in the marketplace today, not just central Indiana or the Midwest, but really across the United States, with so many acquisitions of large brokers, very few of the large brokers will go into these specified and unique kind of arrangements. So I would think we'd have some good opportunity to welcome some new businesses into this mindset through our company, who are just done. They're like, listen, I the old model was easy, and I liked it, but I can't afford it. I wish I could afford it, but I can't.
Well, it takes a culture of an entrepreneurial spirit, and champions at both the consultant and the employer level. And, you know, that takes courage and creativity. I mean, that's our brand, and that's what causes for success. I think ultimately, those two things in a larger broker setting can probably be naturally just a little challenging, because it's a machine. But they can alter their business model as they wish. I mean, we'll all make our own decisions on that, right? So we'll see how that plays out. But tell us what's happening on the commercial insurance side, the personal insurance side, everything that we put under the umbrella of property and casualty insurance.
Yeah, so we primarily work in, I would say, Indiana, central Indiana, though not all of our customers are there. So when you're talking about property and casualty risks of cars being damaged and buildings being hit by weather events and those kind of things, and from a regulatory standpoint, Indiana has always been a very favorable state to insurance companies. Our Department of Insurance is very easy to work with. We generally have just good losses due to our weather risk. I mean, we seem to have a little bit more hail than we had in the past, a little bit more wind than we've had in the past. But a lot of our laws are favorable to a reasonable settlement when it comes time to claim time. So carriers are very willing to come in here. Oftentimes, when a carrier launches a new product or is a new carrier launching across the country, Indiana is usually one of the top 5 states. And so we have always had a lot of carriers, and that's always a great thing for our customers. But if you talk about personal lines, we've got about 8,000 home and auto customers across our book of business. So we get a good sample of what's going on. The biggest thing that we can talk about the last 3 or 4 years has been roofs. This idea that, when you buy a car, brand new car, and you have it for 10 years, when that car gets totaled, you never had a wreck in 10 years, never had a speeding ticket, and it gets totaled at year 10. Do you expect to get a brand new car? No. You expect to get whatever the value of that car minus depreciation is after 10 years. You've already had 10 years of use. Well, forever and a day, roofs have been on a replacement cost basis. And oftentimes you have HUD loans and different things that actually require replacement cost. Well, when you think about that, nothing else in your insurance world is like that. It's always somewhat depreciated. And so the insurance industry, the property and casualty side, particularly in the home and auto, you could have just slapped a label on it and called it the American Roofing Company. They paid for so many roofs that they couldn't support that anymore. Now, if the population wanted to pay more premium and have new roofs every time, then we could do that, but that's not what we wanted. So a lot of these carriers are adding schedules, a roof schedule. What that means is, it's more of we'll do replacement costs for the first 7 or 10 or maybe a few more years. But after that, it's going to go on a depreciation schedule. And that's going to take a lot of people by surprise if their agents and advisors are not letting them know, and we've been telling our people over and over and over again. And I know some are still going to feel like they're surprised, although they shouldn't be, when that next hailstorm comes on their 17-year-old roof and they look at all the new roofs in their neighborhood and they think, I'm going to call my agent and get a new roof. Well, you can get a new roof, but it's going to cost you because it's 15, 17 years old. You're more than halfway through the life of that roof. So less your deductible, less your depreciation, you might have a couple $1,000s to pay for a $15,000 or $20,000 roof. So homeowners are going to have to begin budgeting that. So we come to our next quiz for the day, Ben. How many or what percentage of the United States population rents their primary dwelling?
I'm going to go with 45%.
That's high, but yeah, 102 million or 31.4% of the total population is in a renter situation. Had the opportunity to go to Australia this year, and at one of the conferences I was at, they said they view that in the next 5 years, all of 80% of Australia will live in high-rise apartments. Now, Australia is not known as being a land-poor country. I mean, they have plenty of land, right? So it's not a land issue. So you just drive around Indianapolis, you've got a lot of apartments going up. So you get more and more people moving towards rental situations versus homeowners. And I think some of it is driven by this variable cost. They can't just pay premium and have the roof covered. They got to save money back for those kind of things. Deductibles is the other big topic we've seen, particularly in the home and auto side. If you think about it, your car is worth, let's say, $40,000, $30,000. What's your deductible? Maybe 500, maybe 1,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Your home is worth 3, 4, 500,000. What's your deductible? 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Yeah. The ratio doesn't work. It doesn't make sense that you have something of this value that's 1,000, but you have something that is 10 times the value and it's only the same $1,000 deductible.
That goes back to ability to pay,
Gets back to the ability to pay. So whether it's a deductible on a non-roof issue, something, a fire, a water loss or whatever, they're going to be paying more. If it's a roof issue, you're going to have a higher deductible and you're going to have a roof schedule. So it's just going to take people a little bit by surprise. We've seen rates go up dramatically over the last 5 years. And I've seen even in our own books, our loss ratios are significantly lower than they were even a year ago. And I told our team back then, I said, guys, when you think about these rate increases, the CEOs of these companies who set these, who part of the team to set the rate, they will never lose their job if they overshoot the rate increase. Okay. They might lose some customers because they'll go to the competition. But if they undershoot the rate increase that they needed to combat inflation, and they still lose big money year after year, they just might lose their job. And so I said, be prepared for these carriers to overshoot on the premium. And the first place we're seeing that softening is on the auto. And you're seeing that come in, even mid-year rates coming down on auto. Progressive Insurance is going to jump very soon. State Farm, from a total premium standpoint, which is a big deal. Progressive has probably gone up by at least 50% in the last 3 years. They have just gobbled up business like crazy. Geico as a carrier has now moved into the independent channel. So now more than ever, we've seen households split, meaning I may have your home with one carrier, but your auto oftentimes is going to be with a Progressive or a Geico. So that's an interesting phenomena going on in the personal lines. Any thoughts on that before I bounce to commercial?
Well, it's just kind of, I just keep going back to ability to pay. And all of these things create challenges when unexpected things happen and maybe not even unexpected to some extent, but I'm thinking even health and P&C. So likely, I mean, are we going to see some disruption in like product type when it comes to, I mean, if you're spending $30,000 on a roof, is there a $10,000 option, or are we going to see again, ability to pay? Like, it seems like there's opportunity for some interesting things coming down the pike on that.
Well, in 1942, when my dad and his family moved into their home that my grandmother lived in for 75 years, they covered that roof with shingles, and the shingle was tar paper sprinkled with sand, and that's what they called a shingle. Well, today we cover our roofs with shingles, which is tar paper covered with sand. And to your point about product change, yeah, we are seeing some products change, but I would think in the next 10 years, you're going to see a totally different type of product that they purport, whether it does or not, we'll have to wait and see, truly lasts 30 years and truly can withstand hail. We are definitely seeing more hail events. They're moving east. You're seeing that kind of happen. Michigan is known for being like a no weather state because that big body of water called Lake Michigan tamps down any heat energy. It literally sucks the heat out of weather systems as they move west to east. And last year, along the northern coast of the Maine Peninsula, they had a huge hailstorm, first time ever, and it caused significant damage. And it kind of woke people up to say, wow, we're kind of a no weather state in the sense of, they don't get tornadoes like we do. They don't get the hail like we do.
Right.
I was in Denver and there was a hailstorm and I was in a rental car, and man, I'd never seen hail like that. I mean, they produce hail in a different way out there. And so, yeah, that's going to become a big challenge.
So, so what else are you seeing on the commercial or property and casualty side, or commercial or personal side?
Yeah, commercial has been relative to personal quiet. You go back, we saw that spike of cyber insurance. I mean, it was, you couldn't give it away. Oh, buy it for $1,000. And the guy comes back next year and says, hey, I saw that news article and all those people getting hacked. I'd like to buy cyber insurance. And all of a sudden it's $5,000 or $10,000. So that kind of had its spike and it has since come down. We've seen a lot of, if you're a company that has any exposure to public markets, if you're a company that might be going public or are going public, your directors and officers policies have been a lot higher the last few years due to litigation. On the litigation front, you see it on personal and commercial, but that sort of third-party financing where, and if you've read any articles, a lot of it is offshore. They purport that it's a lot of Chinese. I don't know that it is or isn't, but it's this idea that it's an investment vehicle. So Ben, today you can buy a stock, you can buy a bond, you can buy real estate, but did you realize that you can buy a stake in a lawsuit? So the attorneys have said, hey, we'd love to chase all these different things, but we got to kind of place our bets. We only have so many attorneys and practitioners in our business. We can't be spending this time and money on something that doesn't work. But if you have an investor in the idea who gets a take of the winnings, you can throw a lawsuit at everything. And so this idea, and there's legislation coming in a couple different states, including our own in Indiana, apparently, that's going to attack this third-party litigation funding. So that's going to be a big deal. Property, just like with the home and auto, it took a tick up, but it has softened a little bit. So again, in relation to the personal side, it's been pretty quiet. But as we talked about on our podcast with Michael Klein, it's just always fascinating to me that, there's 500 billion of premium in the U.S. commercial market, and there's 500 billion of premium in the
That
personal
is
market.
fascinating.
It's fascinating. So, and I think a lot of it, you think about big business, a lot of big business self-insures, they have their own captives. So if you were to kind of bring everybody down to a reasonable deductible that Main Street America would have, most of these large businesses, they've got hundreds of thousands or $1 million deductibles on property coverage if they can get it, or they're self-insuring, they're using captive structures. So there's probably a couple 100 billion more out there, but it's all being done self or internal. But in the public market, paid to public, and out carriers that are out there, it's 50-50.
Yeah. So what's our summary of paying attention in the property and casualty world for 2026?
The summary is make sure whoever you're working with, that you're getting their time. Make sure you get their attention and say, hey, let's go through this policy one more time. Make sure I know what's in it. Property and casualty is just the way the forms are structured, have a lot of endorsements. And an endorsement can add to coverage, and an endorsement can take away coverage. And for any business owner, small, medium, or large, I know that insurance can seem overwhelming, and that stack you get from your agent, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to read through all this. But let me tell you, if you just read through it once and understand how things are structured, it's not impossible to understand. Sit down with your agent, your advisor, and say, hey, I'd like to take a few hours and literally go page by page through this policy and maybe tab it out so you can understand how it works. Once you understand how those policies work, it just makes more sense. But if you think of it like something you never want to look at, it'll always seem daunting and something you can't grasp. But let me tell you, you can grasp it.
Yeah. And what I heard is there's, policies are policies. Policies are staying the same. The infrastructure is similar on the property and casualty side, but you have some fundamentals that are changing with how there's risk share. That's especially kind of a felt pain, if you will, on the personal side with, a roof or otherwise. I also heard that we could be in a position where rates settle, maybe even market pressure brings rates down a bit. Maybe not 2026, but in more of the near future, since they overshot and are more profitable at this point. So,
Yeah,
is that fair to say?
That's fair. Our team dealt with, there are two ways that you have a hard market in insurance. One is price. The price goes up.
Well,
The other
inflation,
way
right?
you have a hard market is they restrict what they write and how they write it. And for the better part of 2 years, if there was a crack in a sidewalk that was on your property, some of our carriers would decline you. They were just trying to find ways to reduce their exposure to anybody. And so those things we're seeing loosen up. We're seeing some carriers come to us and say, help, we turned the faucet off for too long. And it's taking a while for the pressure to build back up. And an insurance carrier, particularly on the home and auto side, their retention rate normally is in the 70s. Okay. Obviously as an agent, we've got multiple markets. We strive for mid 90s. We want to lose only 5% because someone passes away or moves to a state that we can't write or whatever. But when you're a carrier and you normally lose 75 or lose 25% of your business in a given year, and you sort of turn off the faucet for 2 years, you're down big time.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, thanks for sharing, Todd. Maybe on the 2026 predictions, what do you think are going to happen to the Indianapolis Colts? Currently 8-3, I believe. Have a 2-game losing streak.
I think they're gonna move to Salt Lake City.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's a bold prediction. Yeah, I think the Colts will make the playoffs. I'm not sure it's going to be the run. I don't know. I think we need a little bit more experience, but it's certainly been a surprising year. Pacers are struggling. They're on the struggle bus with injuries. Obviously, Tyrese Halliburton got injured in the finals in just the most dramatic, disappointing way of just the most magical run of all time in 2025. I think 2026 we probably pick it up a little bit, but hopefully in the draft we'll get a top 10 pick, and that'll end up being a really good add as our team gets healthy and we get Tyrese Halliburton back. Could Purdue win a national championship for the first time in men's basketball?
Maybe.
Number one in the country, looking pretty strong. IU's actually doing pretty well. with a new coach. The IU basketball coach came in and had 0 players on his roster. Just an amazing introduction to the new world of college athletics and transfer portals and otherwise. But put together a team that seems to play hard, and they're, I believe, 7-1 with a game coming up against Louisville and then also Kentucky. So they'll be tested to see.
Do you think that the pro level coaches are better suited now at the college level to build and develop teams because it's more familiar, because it's kind of a new team every year anyway on the national side, just due to contracts and such. Whereas on the college side, it's been kind of more like, hey, I've got this guy or gal for 4 or 5 years.
Well, I mean, on the pro side, you have contracts and you have people that are locked in, and then you have a known free agent market, and that's what they're coaching to, right? So they know what they got, and they're trying to make it the best that they can. I just can't imagine being a college coach at this point, where your recruiting your aperture is unlimited. It's not just high schoolers. It's recruiting from
every school,
every school, D1, D2, D3, NAIA. You could have a stud in NAIA who makes a huge leap in talent that could come in and play at a low-level D1 school and make a difference for them, or someone that's at a mid-major that has really excelled and now transfers to, Purdue or Indiana and changes the game. I mean, we're seeing it play out with Indiana football, with Coach Cignetti and people coming from James Madison and turning that culture around immediately and turning them into a contender. So, I mean, I think being a college sports coach, obviously that's kind of like people look at that as like a job that you desire to have. I think it's more difficult than it's ever been. It's harder to find success, and the fan bases wants instant gratification or you're out. I mean, the payouts to these coaches as they get fired and they go and re-up to massive contracts again. I mean, look at LSU, paid for Kiffin, massive buyout of Brian Kelly, massive buyout of the coach before, Ogeron. I mean, they're just dumping so much money in the state of Louisiana into a football team. But obviously it's big business, and they want to see success. So, but anyway, just wanted to get the 2026 predictions for the Hoosiers, the Boilers, Pacers, Colts. Butler seems like they're on the upswing on the men's basketball side, and obviously we're cheering for Coach Parkinson for the Butler women. But yeah, any parting words as we go into 2026, Todd?
No parting words. I always get excited this time of year. I'm a planner, so I enjoy making the plan, working the plan out, and I'm also very much of an optimist. So there are headwinds, but I always see the tailwinds as being greater. And we work in a great industry in the greatest country in the world and the greatest agency I've ever seen in the United States. So I'm happy to be here and happy to be doing it here.
And we know who sits on the ultimate throne and how everything ends. So good reasons to be optimistic. All right. Well, thanks to our listeners for joining us on the Looking Into 2026 episode with Todd and myself. And we wish you a happy new year. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for tuning in to Risk and Resolve. See you next time.